Past the Wire video brought to you by our friends at Spendthrift Farm. I am John Stettin. I am in the Past the Wire War Room office studio, all rolled up in one. And we've got another video today that I think you're going to find interesting. It's an interesting war story, and I decided to tell it today because of an article that Sue Finley wrote in Thoroughbred Daily News about a young man named Philip Miller and his experience in trying to become a jockey agent in New York at the NYRA tracks, which they're running, as we all know, at Aqueduct right now. He had an opportunity to represent the young lady who rode at Monmouth. I think her name is Farron Peterson, and let me make sure I get that correct because I should know that. So I just want to make sure that is the correct way to say her name. Yes, Farron Peterson, who was represented at Monmouth. Excellent launch to her career, represented by Julie Crone, Hall of Fame rider in her own right. She was Farron's agent at the recently concluded Monmouth meet. And this young man who knows Sue tried to become an agent in New York and was told he wasn't qualified. And it brought up some interesting memories for me and a story that I'm going to share. It's, one from the vault, so to speak. And, I have my way of getting to things. So I sometimes don't drive in a straight line. So I'll give you a little bit of the history. I was a jockey agent for a short time in New York at the NYRA tracks, and probably one of the worst jockey agents ever. Was definitely not for me. Not my cup of tea, not for my personality, but how I became an agent and the experience that I had as an agent was phenomenal and very interesting. And all started over a car, believe it or not, an electric blue Corvette. I've always been a car guy. I've had Ferraris, Maseratis, BMWs, Mercedes, and everything you could imagine in between. Always liked nice cars. Back in the day, Eldorado Baritzes, Lincoln Continentals, Fleetwood Brougham, you name it. Always. But one exactly always that way. I remember one year at Saratoga, I had gone with my girlfriend at the time to dinner at the Wishing Well, and I was maybe 17 or 18 years old. She was a couple of years older than me, maybe 20 years old or something. And back then, I was driving a 1972 gray Plymouth Duster, and it had been hit on the passenger side, so it had a big dent in the passenger door. Those were two-door cars, and it was all smashed in. I never got it fixed, and you couldn't get in on the passenger side because that door didn't open or close. As a matter of fact, what was holding it closed was a rope that I tied around the head, around the handle of the car to close the door to the headrest of the driver's car. That's what kept the door closed. You had to get in. She had a poor girl had to get in on the driver's side and slide over and slide under the rope, which also served as a seatbelt. So it kind of worked out good in that way because we didn't wear seatbelts back then. So she was kind of belted in by the rope, so it was kind of safe if we ever had an accident, which fortunately we didn't. But, the car looked really, really bad. And it was so bad, I had a piece of cardboard on the floor on the passenger side that she had to sit in as well. And as I remember correctly, if you took that cardboard up, which I had to replace every time it rained because when it got wet, it would get saturated. But if you took that up, you could see down to the street. There was like a hole in the floorboard of the car. You could actually see pavement. Kind of like the Flintstones. You could run if you ran out of gas and maybe move the car. It was that bad. So coming out of the Wishing Well, might have even been Travers or Whitney Day. I had a great time back then. My dad was a mutual clerk. So I used to spend every summer as a kid up at Saratoga. We packed up from Brooklyn, went up to Saratoga for the meet from the time I was born till years. So I was used to spending every summer up at Saratoga, and it's, one of the reasons I became, so involved in the game. So we were up there for the month. I had this ridiculous car, went to dinner at the Wishing Well. We come out, everybody was valeting, so people come out, the black Mercedes, the white Cadillac, the brown Lincoln, the this, the that. I was like the silver Plymouth. That car pulled up. Everybody watched us get in, her slide over. It was humiliating. Definitely not a vehicle that was flattering to any Pick Six King or anybody else. But I always was a car guy, and eventually things got a little better in the wheels department. And, I always liked cars. And coincidentally, at Saratoga, the mutual clerks used to park in the lot across Union Avenue by one of the training tracks, and you used to have to walk across and walk past some of the barns and cross Union Avenue to go into the racetrack, because that's where they had the free parking for the clerks. So we used to park there every morning and walk across. And one morning it was raining, and you know how muddy it gets over there at Saratoga. Everybody was full of mud. Your shoes were full of mud. All the cars were full of mud. There was no way around it. And we're walking through the cross, and we cross the street and across some of the horse paths and whatnot. And we passed this one barn, and in front of the barn was this electric blue Corvette. And I don't know, still to this day, I don't know how the car had no mud on it. It didn't have a speck of mud or water or rain or anything on it. Looked like it somehow came out of the showroom without even hitting the ground, and was just placed in front of this barn, and just didn't get a speck of dirt or mud on it in the rain. And I walked past, I'm like, wow, what a nice Corvette it was. It was electric blue, it was beautiful. Okay, it looked like it just come out of the showroom. And I walked past it, and back then they used to give you stickers based on what you wore at the racetrack. If you were an owner, you had an owner sticker, and they used to go right on the bumper of the car. Cars had bumpers back then. Vets didn't have bumpers even then. So right on the corner of this car was a sticker, and it said Jockey Agent. And I looked at it, and I was maybe 15, 16 years old, whatever it was. I wasn't driving yet, but I said, I want that car, and I want to be a jockey agent. I didn't even know what a jockey agent was, but I knew I wanted to be one, and I knew I wanted that car. So I started to look into it, and, as things would have it, years later, off topic just for a quick second, the theme of Sue's article, and she's 100% correct, is that, racing wants new blood, or does it? And they say they do, and they really should, but do they? I don't know the answer to that, because they certainly don't make it easy. And we're only going to talk about this one little area today, but there are so many areas of racing that really make it difficult for any new blood to get involved, or even want to get involved. And if they do so want to get involved, it just is very difficult to break down those barriers that are either intentionally put up, coincidentally put up, wound up put up, or whatever the case may be. But anyway, my dad was a clerk, and I eventually became a mutual clerk part-time. Used to have to shape up and work a certain amount of time to get into the union and, become what they called a regular. And it was a whole big process. And it went by seniority and by days shaping up and working. So when you shaped up, you would stand around outside. The regular guys, like my dad, the union guys, and my brother would get their assignment, go to their regularly designated windows, and you would shape up. And if they needed you, they called you, and you pretty much knew the days you would work and you wouldn't work. You pretty much worked every Saturday and Sunday, holidays, this and that. And you used to have to build up those days trying to get into the union. There were a lot of guys that worked on the backside, in the backstretch, in various capacities, from barn foremen, assistant trainers, exercise riders, hot walkers, all kinds of different things, that also, after the morning, would go shape up and work behind the windows at the racetrack, okay, as mutual clerks, and other jobs on the front side as well. So that was very, very common practice. A lot of people did it. I even worked with a gentleman by the name of Anthony Garamone, very nice guy, who was a jockey. And he was a very, very successful bug rider, but when he got his journeyman, he didn't ride as much. And on days that he didn't ride, he exercised horses in the morning. And when he had no mounts, he worked as a clerk behind the windows. I worked with Eric Guerin, Hall of Fame rider, Jimmy Kennedy, exercised Seattle Slew, a lot of other famous horses. I think Secretariat too, a couple of times. But all kinds of, guys worked back there, and I knew them all. We all knew each other, everybody. The racetrack back then, and probably today still, but especially at NYRA, was very cliquish. Everybody knew everybody, but everybody fell into different cliques, okay? And they weren't always cooperative with one another, but in some degrees they were, but everybody knew everybody, and, we were all part of the NYRA family, but in their separate little cliques. My dad was there for a long time, was very, very well liked, very, very, very much respected by everybody. He was a no-nonsense guy, and, everybody knew that, so they respected him for that, and he was active in the union for the mutual clerks, and, I was his, kid's son and around the racetrack all the time. I remember when I was really young, I dropped out of school. My dad said, "You think you're hanging around the park every day?" "No, you're coming to work with me." He used to bring me to the races. I loved it. I didn't mind. It wasn't punishment. I was glad I dropped out of school and was going to the track with him. So, in any event, I'm shaping up one day, okay? And I'm talking to this kid who's an exercise rider. His name was Ralph Foresta. And he told me he'd want to race, and he gets on horses in the morning, and we got a little friendly. He was getting on at the time. I want to say Slew of Gold was a 2-year-old, and he took me to see Slew of Gold, big, monstrous horse. And for a 2-year-old, Sidney Waters had him at that time. And he wanted to be a rider. And I'm like, well, if you rode a couple of races and you won a race, how come you're not a rider? I don't understand. He goes, I can't find an agent. Dang, I'm like, I'll be your agent. I want to be an agent. He goes, you ever been one? I'm like, no. I said, what is it involved? We go around in the morning. I ask people to give you mounts. I could figure out how to do that. He goes, no, it's involved. You got to be nice. You got to hand out overnights. I said, listen, I can do it. A very, very dear friend of my dad's, a gentleman by the name of Steve Palumbo, overheard the conversation, okay? And he knew much more about it than I did and knew people on the backside. And he said, hey, listen, he goes, if you do this, he goes, I'll meet you out there and I'll take you around and I'll introduce you to some trainers and help you, get started and learn how to, become an agent. He goes, don't be intimidated. You can do it. You just got to get a license. And he was very helpful and very instrumental and kind of encouraged me. And I said, okay, if he's willing to help me and meet me out there, which he was, an older guy, my dad's age. I mean, he was going to meet me 5, 6 in the morning before he went to work at the races. That was a heck of a generous offer. So I said, okay, let me see how to do this, So I went into the licensing office and I said to them, listen, I want to get a jockey agent's license. And the guy at the time, I want to say his name was Joe Russo, that ran the licensing office. And he knew me. He was a little familiar with me and knew me from being around the racetrack. And he was like, why do you want to be a jockey agent? You've never done anything like this. It's not the kind of thing anybody just comes and wants to do, So I'm like, yeah, I want to do it. I got a rider that's going to give me their book, and I want to do it. He goes, well, you got to take a test. It's hard. I'm like, how hard could it be? Well, you got to know the condition book. I said, I know how to read a condition book, which I really didn't, but I knew the conditions of a race, and I figured, let me try it. So he goes, okay, you want to take the test? He goes, come back tomorrow and whatever, take the test. I'm like, okay. I take the test, and I aced it. It wasn't that hard. It was, they would tell you such and such a horse ran in a maiden claimer for $20,000. Then he ran in this race. Then he ran in that race. Is he eligible to run in which of the following races? And they would give you conditions for races. Now one is a 2, now one is a 3. Maybe he was eligible for 1 of them, 2 of them, 3 of them, whatever. So it's all those kind of things. So if you're a sharp reader of the racing form, okay, I don't know what the test is like today, but back then, if you were a sharp reader of the racing form and you knew how to read the conditions, of the race, which is the first thing on the top of the past performances, you could pass that test. So it was no problem. Aced it, got a jockey agent license. I'm like, this is beautiful. I'm going to be an agent, And I thought I was going to go right to work as being an agent, and then I got called in by the mutual department. And they said, okay, you got your agent's license? I said, yeah. They're like, okay, you have to go see, they gave me some guy's name in the licensing office, the same office where this Joe Russo guy worked, but I had to go see somebody else. Like, you have to go see this guy. Why? Mom, you just have to go see this guy. Okay, so I go see, I can't remember who the person was, but I go back to that office. I walk in, I see the guy, and he goes, listen, you have to either surrender the jockey agent's license. I says, the one that I just got, which I was so proud of, that jockey agent badge with my picture on it. I thought I was an agent, I was already thinking about the blue Corvette and when I was going to get it. So I'm like, what are you talking about? I just got my thing. He goes, well, you either have to give me that back or the mutual clerk license because you can't do both. I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, no, you're not allowed to do both. You have to do one or the other. I'm like, why? He goes, because you're not allowed to work on the backstretch and in the mutual department. So I said, listen, what are you talking about? There's about 50, maybe, what are there, 300 clerks? Maybe 50 or 75 of them work on the backstretch in the morning. I don't understand what you're talking about. He said, no, they don't. You're not allowed to do that. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, I absolutely know what I'm talking about. The guy that I'm going to be an agent for is a mutual clerk with me. He works in the morning working out horses. He wants to get mounts. I don't understand what you're talking about. No, you have to give me one badge or the other. I'm like, all right, you know what? I want to be an agent. I don't care about being a mutual clerk. Here, take it. So I give him the badge. So I tell my dad what happens, and he's like, it's ridiculous. Go talk to, it was either John Pacino or Nick Precioso. One of those two guys were union delegates at that time. I'm pretty sure it was one of those two guys. Might have been someone else, but I think it was one of them. And I went and I told them what happened. They said, no, that's ridiculous. We'll talk to the union. They can't do that to you. And at that time, the union was trying to show that they didn't only represent their members, they also represented the extras like I was, because I technically wasn't in the union yet. So they wanted to show an example to management that, no, we represent the extras too. So they took a little bit of an interest in my case that they probably normally wouldn't have. And I was frustrated by it, and I started thinking, they're not doing the right thing by me. This is nonsense. Excuse me. So what did I do? I said, on my own, I'm going to go see if I can make any headway with this. So I was always the kind of person who was not easily intimidated, and I like to go right to the source, right to the top. The head of NYRA at that time was a guy by the name of Gerald McKeon. Might have been Gerard McKeon. So I went right to his office. And I asked for him. I said, I'm a mutual clerk and jockey agent, and I'd like to see Mr. McKeon. What is this about? Well, it's an issue I have with my agent and whatnot license. I said, well, he's the secretary. He said, he's busy right now, but, you can try again later. And I did, and it took about 3 or 4 visits for her to say, well, yeah, let me see if he'll see you. So her office was outside of his office, and I want to say they were at Aqueduct at this time. And when you first walked in the clubhouse entrance of Aqueduct, no, not the clubhouse entrance, the entrance where the escalator took you upstairs, where the bagel stand was on the left, if you're familiar with Aqueduct, how it was back then, I think his office was off to the right. Okay, under that escalator. And her office was in front of his. And when she brought me in to see him, I never took me in his office, okay? He came out and stood in the doorway of his office and left me standing in front of her desk in the outer office. So I didn't rate an invitation into his office to tell him what my problem was. I was, second-class citizen, so I was going to stand outside. He was, going to be courteous enough to just listen to me from the doorway of his office, which he did. So he came out there and he goes, what can I do for you? And I said, listen, I've been here a long time. My dad's here a long time. I've been a mutual clerk. I just got my jockey agent's license. They're telling me I can't do both, and a lot of people do both. It just seems ridiculous. So I know you're the president. I figured I would tell you about it, see if you can help me or intervene or straighten this out for me. And he goes, well, I'll look into it and get back to you. He goes, but that doesn't sound like it should be a problem. I'm aware that a lot of people do both. I don't know the particulars, but yeah, I'll look into it and I'll reach out to you or try and get back to you on it. I said, okay, I would, really appreciate it. I walked out there, not really impressed, not really optimistic, but saying, okay, we'll see what happens, okay? The union then has me talk to a guy by the name of, I want to say Norman Rothwell, who was the lawyer for the mutual department at the time. And he said that they would take my case and file for arbitration because they weren't allowed to pull my mutual clerk license because of my becoming a jockey agent. And they filed for arbitration on my behalf. And it was an interesting and educational experience for me. And it was funny. NYRA was represented by their house counsel, a guy by the name of Martin Lieberman. And the union guys told me that this guy, Rothfeld, was a brilliant lawyer, but a little eccentric. And it turned into like, my first experience of what like a court case was like, because even though it was binding arbitration, you sat in an office, the arbitrator sat there like a judge, they called witnesses, they were testifying, they were swearing people in, and it was all about, whether you could work on the backside and as a mutual clerk. And there were so many people that did that, it just sounded comical to me. And one of the things that came up, which I found really interesting, was, they asked me during my questioning, did you talk to anybody about, this and, try and get this resolved in any way? And I said, yes, I actually went to the head of NYRA, Gerard McKeon. And they're like, well, what did he tell you? He told me that he didn't think that there would be a problem and that he would look into it. And I never heard back from him, and here I'm sitting now in arbitration. And believe it or not, they called Mr. McKeon in to testify. And they asked him, did this guy ever come to see you? He goes, I don't remember that. And I looked at him, I was like, wow. He said, did you ever tell him this, or this? He goes, no, I don't ever remember speaking to him about anything. I'm pretty sure I would remember that. Never came to speak to me. I was like, wow, why would they go to such lengths to kind of prove a point or not let me do what they let so many other people do? And was it that they didn't want me to be a clerk or didn't want me to be an agent? I didn't know. Anyway, this, I kind of knew I was going to lose. Rothfeld used to tell me we were going to win. And lawyers, I know, never like to tell anybody they're going to win. But he was like, listen, there's no way we can lose this case. I never felt that way, and I'll tell you why. We would have these hearings, and they lasted for about a week. And they were all-day affairs, and we would have lunch, and we would go into this little lunchroom at the racetrack, and Lieberman, the racetrack's attorney, would go sit with the arbitrator, and I want to say his last name was Mortimer, but I don't remember. This was so many years ago. But they would sit and have lunch together like best friends, and I'd be sitting with this eccentric guy, Rothfeld, who was picking at his food and telling me crazy stories and dressed very sloppily, and I would be like, this guy's having lunch with the arbitrator and you're having lunch with me and you're telling me we're going to win? We are a bet against big time. We are not going to win. Sure enough, what happens is the case gets finished and he says, there's no way based on the evidence we're going to lose this case. Guess what? We lost. They couldn't find a way to rule against me based on the evidence. What they did was they did something that's called time barred. They time barred the grievance, which basically said I didn't file it in time. I didn't file it timely enough. I didn't file it at all. This guy Rothfeld, who I assume knew the rules, filed it, and he said this is something that in all the grievances and arbitrations he had done for years on NYRA, they had never ruled anything time barred. Okay, so it was the only way that they found that they could stop me. Now, they didn't stop me from being an agent. I gave up my mutual license, so I was able to go and work as a jockey agent. And again, I was the worst agent ever. First off, anybody that wants to be an agent, hats off to them. Okay, a lot of people helped me. Steve Palumbo, that fine gentleman, helped me a lot. He would meet me in the mornings, introduce me to trainers. I'd go around with Ralph Foresta. He taught me how to go to the barns. Can we do anything for you? Can we work any horses for you? Give them the overnights, give them the condition books, offer to bring coffee, all these kinds of friendly things, let's say, that I don't really like to do to people that I don't know. If I don't know you, I'm not a very friendly guy. And if I don't like you, I'm a least friendly guy. And if you don't like me, I'm even a less friendly guy. So it was not for my kind of personality. The hours were insane, okay? I lived in Brooklyn. I would drive to the racetrack 5 o'clock in the morning. Poor Steve used to meet me. He was an older guy coming from way out on the island, and he stayed all day. What I would do is I would drive from Brooklyn to either Belmont, usually Belmont, all right, get there 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, stay till about 9:30, 10 o'clock, go back, take a shower, come back again for the races, have to be there for the draw, which was like 12 o'clock, then be there for the races all day because I used to like to bet and hang out. and then go back home and do this like 6 days a week. Tuesday was the dark day back then, and even Tuesday had to go in the morning, so it was 7 days a week. I couldn't get a mount. We couldn't win a race. You're not making any money. It was a really grind. I don't know how I lasted for the 2 or 3 years that I did. I guess dreaming of that Corvette that I ultimately got, but it was with money I won, not money that I earned being no jockey agent, that's for sure. So, and you know, Ralph lasted for a while. And then some other people gave me a chance. Donald Smith, dear friend of mine to this day. He is a steward at Parks. His dad was Gail Smith. He was involved in the Triple Dead Heat and the Carter Handicap on Wait a Bit. Great guy, very good rider. Came to New York with no following, no reputation, nothing at the time. Met me, gave me a chance with his book. I tried. Like I said, it wasn't me, you know. And other people, in addition to Steve Palumbo, tried to help me. Eddie Belmonte, the great rider's son, was an agent at the time. Tommy Cordero, Angel's son, was an agent at the time. All tried to help me. They had a lot more experience than me, and they were all good to me. And it just wasn't for me. The older agents like Lenny Goodman, Vic Gelati, Chuck Del Prado, who had the Cash Asmussen, a whole bunch of those guys, I got to know them all. George DeJesus was the head of the agents back then. Vinny Catronio, who was kind of like me. He was kind of like masquerading as an agent. Never had a rider, but had an agent's license every year. Got very friendly with him. There were a lot of guys that, I got to know, and the older agents, okay, not Eddie Boy and Tommy, because they were kind of like me. They were a little bit, they had fathers who were legends as riders, so they were a little bit more accepted, but they weren't really accepted by these older guys. These older guys, they were leery of me. They were like looking at me like, who is this guy that we don't know that's now in here with us trying to become an agent? So they were very leery of me, and tried to be friendly and helpful on the surface, but would have stuck a knife in my back in a second. And I was a kid and already knew that then. You could just see it and feel it and know it. So they were friendly, but from a distance, let's say. But it was a very interesting experience. But the point of me telling this whole story now is that there was definitely a systematic effort, okay, to keep me out of being an agent, all right? It didn't work because they assumed I would go for the money and the job as a mutual clerk like my dad was, and like I was, and like I was guaranteed to be. And I didn't. I said, no, I want to be an agent. Take the mutual license. I'm keeping the agent license. So Joe Russo, who gave me the test, probably shouldn't have, okay? They probably were upset with him for giving me that test and not discouraging me or nipping that in the bud, because I could just tell in my conversations with him after that, that he had caught some flack over that. So it was pretty obvious that they didn't want an outsider or anyone they considered an outsider to become an agent. And I'm like, when I read Sue's article about this kid, Philip Miller, I was like, I know exactly what they did. Braulio Baeza, the steward, told him, no, you're not qualified. The kid was an owner, owned a racehorse. He's a college graduate. They come up with these requirements that they enforce if you're not, quote, in the club. They don't enforce if you are in the club. How do you get in the club? I don't know. But, we are in an industry that desperately needs new blood and fresh blood and new ideas and innovative ideas and sharp people. And here's a young man that knows Sue and sounds like a very sharp and interesting and bright young man that would probably be an asset to the game in any capacity, and might turn out to be a very good agent. This young lady rider has a future, and she's willing to give him a shot. And there's no reason that he shouldn't be able to sit for that test and try his luck. If he's willing to go to those barns in the morning and work on a commission basis, trying to sell that rider and get mounts, I don't think that NYRA or the state of New York or anybody should be stopping him from doing that. It's unfortunate. We need people like that. We need new people. We need new blood. We don't need to lock people out. And we do this in every aspect of the racing industry. We make it difficult to break down those barriers, and it's just nonsense. And it's one of the many things that are eroding and eating away and chipping away at this game and putting more nails in those coffins and just burying us as a sport and as an industry. And Sue was right on when she said that. Does racing want new blood? Does it or doesn't it? Yeah, on the surface they say they do, but do they help anybody get in? No. Do they stop a lot of people getting in? Yes. Do they discourage you? Yes. Do they have programs that on the surface that, Arizona program and Godolphin Flying Start? Yeah. But when you come out of those programs, maybe some places you get help, maybe some you don't. Godolphin, you kind of have to have a foot in the door anyway in order to get in, and when you get out, it's kind of who you know. That Arizona racetrack program, maybe you got a better shot cold coming out of there than anywhere else. But if you don't go through the certain channels that they want you to go through, and you try and do what this young man tried to do, you can get met with a lot of discouraging resistance, and that's unfortunate for the sport, because in the long run, the game will pay the price, and the people that are locking this guy out are the ones that are going to pay the price. So that's just unfortunate. But for me, it was an educational process, and experience didn't hurt me in any way. If anything, I learned from it. I made some good friends. I'm still close with a lot of those people that I met and worked with as an agent, and some of the experience were great. I mean, I got friendly at the time with Leroy Jolly's son, Lee Jolly. I was by that barn every day with Donald Smith, and he would work a ton of those horses, and then Angel Cordero or Jacinto Vasquez would come by and say, hey, and their agent would get all the calls in the book. So we were working out the horses for them, which is very unfortunate, but how it goes, if you around the backside, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But we did get, a shot from Alan Jerkins, and we rode it, Leroy Jolly would throw us a bone or a crumb once in a while, and we'd ride one for him. Jan Nehrude, I think, did with Taunton Farm. We would go by his barn. It was very friendly. Leo O'Brien, we used to go see every day. Poor Leo O'Brien back then had one horse. And when we used to, Donald Smith and I would laugh, because every time we went by, poor Leo himself was on his hands and knees taking care of that one horse. We don't even know what he was doing in there, but he was always down on his hands and knees in the hay, in the soup with this one horse. And he wound up having a very successful training career. His son Keith, I've worked with, a great guy as well. Leo's a great guy. He's Johnny Velasquez's father-in-law. Trained four-star Dave, career took off after that. But when I was doing this, he had one horse, one stall, and he was always on his hands and knees working as hard as anybody I know. But it was a lot of great experience and a lot of fun. But they did not make it easy, and they made me sacrifice my mutual license and all my seniority. They took away from me. I would have been one of the lowest, or highest, depending on how you look at it, ranking union guys at a very young age. And, that was a decent job back then if you were looking for that kind of job. I wasn't. I always was attracted to the gambling side of the game and just, went in a different direction than that. But it was a good job, and, they kind of took me out of any opportunity to have it and have the seniority that I was entitled to, just to try and prove a point and not let me become a jockey agent, which was a bunch of nonsense, and they never should have gotten away with it, and with that stupid time bar ruling. And anyway, that's what happened, and that's the story. And I wrote to Sue and I said, I wish I knew that you were writing that article, because I would have told you about my experience, and I'm thinking about writing about it. And she was like, yeah, go ahead, you should. But instead of writing, I thought I would just do this little video on it and tell the story. It was an easier story to tell than to maybe write about, and I just felt like doing it this way. So I hope I didn't bore you too much, and that's all I got for now. We'll be back with a bunch more videos soon. Thank you to our friends at Spendthrift Farm for making these videos possible. Thank you for tuning in. And that's all for now. So ciao for now, and we'll be back soon.